Hello, and thank you for joining me for PAX Academy's session on grades. Today, we're going to talk about the 5 different pillars of unschooling. Then we're going to review the 3 different types of grades and how they impact us. We'll talk about grade level recommendations, and then we're going to talk about how you can actually earn grades through PAX Academy. And last but not least, we'll talk about specifically how you can submit grades as a PAX Academy student. The purpose of education is to build the self. And at PAX Academy, we provide you with the freedom to be able to do just that through our unique educational philosophy known as unschooling. In order to build the self, we need to focus on 5 key pillars of unschooling, which I like to call the 5 M's. The first one is motivate. The word motivate means to have a reason for doing something. It also means to inspire a strong desire to do well or succeed. We all want our children to be motivated. We want them to discover their reason for being. And we want them to be inspired and to have a strong desire to do well and succeed. There are 2 different types of motivation which we need to consider: extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation is the motivation that comes from outside of ourself, primarily through rewards and punishment. In contrast, intrinsic motivation is something that comes from within us, primarily through passion and purpose. To help demonstrate the difference between these types of motivations, let's look at this example. Here we have 3 doctors. These 3 doctors, Dr. Paul, Dr. Rose, and Dr. Peter, all grew up in the same town. They attended the same schools, shared the same teachers, got all the same grades, and eventually they went on to the same university. They got accepted into the same medical school, and now they are pursuing their careers as medical doctors. The difference between these 3 is their motivation. Dr. Paul comes from a long line of doctors. His father was a doctor, his grandfather was a doctor, and even his great-grandfather was a doctor. Even though he never really wanted to be a doctor, he was too afraid to disappoint his family. And so he set aside his own dreams and is now pursuing a career that he hates, all to avoid the punishment of his family shaming him and humiliating him. Next, we see Dr. Rose. Dr. Rose decided that she wanted to become a doctor when she started researching the highest paying jobs in the United States. When she learned that she could earn 6 figures by becoming a doctor, she made up her mind to do it. She was motivated by the reward of a steady paycheck and a big one. However, she experiences high levels of stress and anxiety that have made her quality of life terrible. And last but not least, we have Dr. Peter. Dr. Peter knew that he wanted to become a doctor ever since he was a little child. He has always had a passion for health and helping others. As a result, even when he has a rough day in the hospital, he is still motivated by his passion for the profession and by the deep sense of purpose that he feels when he helps his patients. With this example, we see 3 different people with 3 different types of motivation. Dr. Paul, who is motivated by avoiding punishment, Dr. Rose, who was motivated by the reward of money, and Dr. Peter, who was motivated by his internal sense of passion and purpose. Which kind of doctor would you want your child to be? These different types of motivations are not only relevant to adults in their careers, but also for children. Let's take a look at another experiment that talks about motivation in children. Many years ago, Dr. Lepper performed an experiment on preschool children in order to learn more about motivation. He divided a group of preschoolers into 3 different groups. The first group would receive an expected award every time they would draw something. The second group would receive a reward, but they were not told in advance that they would get one. So it was simply a pleasant surprise after they drew something. And the third group received no reward. After several weeks, he returned to find that the group that was receiving a reward through extrinsic motivation had decreased their interest and their creativity in drawing by almost half. The study concluded that when we provide children with extrinsic rewards, we actually decrease their intrinsic motivation. And the group that received no reward continued to draw simply because they loved it, not because they were expecting to get anything from it. You see, a reward is essentially a bribe, and it does not take long for children to realize this. The purpose of a bribe is to try to coerce someone to do something that they otherwise would not willingly want to do. And this is why we often have parents that try to bribe their kids to eat their vegetables. Finish your veggies and then you can eat some ice cream. When we try to bribe children through offering extrinsic rewards, it creates the opposite effect of what we intend. It emphasizes how terrible the original thing is. Vegetables must be really awful if parents have to bribe their kids with ice cream to get them to eat it. This kind of extrinsic motivation will never inspire a love of vegetables. And in the same way, we will never inspire a love of learning as long as we try to bribe children to learn or attempt to motivate them through extrinsic rewards such as grades, stickers, and certificates. So when we look back at extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation, we see that they produce very, very different results in children. Extrinsic motivation produces fear, guilt, depression, anxiety, frustration, feelings of hopelessness, and selfishness. In contrast, intrinsic motivation shows up as passion, purpose, happiness, peace, perseverance, hopefulness, and selflessness. Now, how do you want your children to be motivated? Through extrinsic motivation or through intrinsic motivation? I want my children to be self-motivated, and I hope that you do too. All right, now let's talk about the next M. The next M is manage. The word manage means to maintain control or influence. This is why we often refer to unschooling as self-directed learning, because we want our children to manage themselves. And they cannot learn to manage themselves as long as we are trying to maintain control over them. We have to relinquish control and to trust our children, trust the process, and also trust ourselves. I invite you to consider what would you need to change in order to inspire your child to self-manage. Next, we want our children to self-monitor. The word monitor means to observe and check the progress or the quality of something over a period of time. This is a huge part of learning to be unschoolers because in traditional school, our children are monitored by teachers. They are not taught to self-monitor. However, in real life, we want our children to learn how to monitor themselves, to assess their progress or their lack thereof, and to accurately assess the quality of their work. This is what people do in the real world. We learn how to monitor our time, our money, our skills, our learning, and our growth. To help our children learn how to self-monitor, we want to engage with the 5 C's. The first C is curiosity. So rather than making judgments about our children, we need to learn how to get curious about them and their interests. We can do this by making observations, by asking great questions about them, and also by listening intently to what they have to say. For example, when my children were younger, I would ask them to clean the playroom. When they were toddlers, this is something that we would have to do together because I had to model my expectations for them and what and how to clean. And then when we would finish, I would ask questions like, how do you feel about the work that we did? Are you proud of how we cleaned this room? Do you see any areas where we could improve? This practice of asking these kinds of questions encourages self-monitoring and reflecting. It also helped to teach my children to assess what they had done well and what they needed to improve on, rather than expecting me to tell them what they did well and what they needed to improve on. The next C is challenge. Challenge yourself to do something new by making use of what we call the video game effect. Not too long ago, I found my old Nintendo 64 console in my parents' garage. I pulled it out, hooked it up, and I was shocked to find that it was still working. My daughter wanted to play, and so I popped the Super Mario game into the console and turned it on. When we went to the first level, where Babam was waiting at the top of Mushroom Mountain, my daughter literally could not move forward in the Mario world. She was absolutely terrified. There were all these little mushrooms walking around, and she was so scared that she was going to die. So she asked me to do it for her. I took the controller and I showed her how to jump on their little heads, and then they would disappear. But every time she tried, they would just bump into her and she would freak out, and then eventually Mario would die. She was down to her last life and asked me, "What will happen if I run out of lives?" And I looked at her, thought about it for a second, and said, "Well, you just try again." And she looked at me a bit confused and said, "Wait a minute. So if I run out of lives and I die, then I just respawn and get all my lives back?" And I said, "Yep." And it was as if this wave of relief just washed over her. The knowledge that if she tried and failed, she could just try again. That gave her the freedom to take a risk that she had been previously too afraid to do. Now, obviously, in real life, death is kind of final, but for most challenges that we face in life, we will be able to try again. In fact, there was a study conducted by Oxford that showed that people who played video games experienced less trauma after adverse experiences in their real life. They had built up a level of resilience from challenging themselves and being able to know that they can always start over or try again. Number 3, competence. As we seek to help our children build their level of competence, it's important that we can acknowledge that our desire to learn and improve is completely natural. No human being wants to just stay the same. We all want to learn and grow and improve. So, self monitoring will help us to grow in our competence. For my birthday a few weeks ago, my 9-year-old daughter made breakfast for me. This is something she was self motivated to do. She had demonstrated the ability to self manage. I knew that she had mastered safety in the kitchen and using a stove, and now she wanted the opportunity to cook all by herself. And she did. The entire time she was monitoring herself and she was analyzing how she achieved competence in cooking, a competence that she did not have before. And number 4, control. This is one of the most important lessons that we can ever impart to our children. You are in control of your own life. You are responsible for your own choices. This is both a wonderful thing and a terrifying thing at the same time. When I understand that I am in control of my life, then that means that I cannot blame anyone else for the things that happen to me and for the way that I am. But at the same time, that also means that I am powerful enough to make a change where I need to, because the only one who is controlling me is me. As we prepare our children for adulthood, we must learn to relinquish control and empower our children to self-monitor. And last but not least, context. One of the ways that we can self-monitor is by changing our context. Be willing to think outside the box, to consider new opinions and new ideas, and to reflect on the context that you have created for your own life. Some of us have created a context for our lives that says something like, "I am weak," or "I am a failure," or "I don't belong here." That is not an empowering context from which to live our lives. What if you created a new context that says, "I am worthy, I am powerful, I'm a leader, I'm destined for greatness, I will succeed at whatever I put my hand and my heart to"? Creating a new context is part of learning to self-monitor. Next, as unschoolers, we want our children to self-modify. The word modify means to make a change, and this really does go hand in hand with self-monitoring. As we mentioned previously, as our children master the art of self-monitoring, we also want them to engage in self-modifying, where they make changes based on their self-monitoring. As they set new goals or embrace new challenges, they can be flexible to make changes as they need to. Again, it is not my job to change or control my child. My child is the only person who can change or control themselves. And likewise, I am the only person who can change and control myself. And our final M is to self-mobilize. The word mobilize means to take action and to be released. This is the ultimate goal of parenthood, that one day our children will take action and they will one day be released into the world to accomplish all of their unique goals and dreams. Now, I want you to have all 5 of these pillars in mind as we shift to discussing about the practical topic of grades as it relates to unschoolers. Keep in mind, the focus, even when we're talking about grades, is that we want our children to be self-motivated, self-managing, self-monitoring, self-modifying, and ultimately self-mobilizing. All right, now let's talk about grades. In school, there are 3 different things that we typically mean when we refer to grades. First and foremost, when we refer to grades, we're referring to a child's age. Age-based grading is the first way that students are graded in compulsory school. Someone simply decided that kindergarten is the grade for a human being that has existed on this planet for 5 years. Why? Many homeschoolers will ask me, what will happen if my child wants to go back to school one day? Well, in most cases, they will simply put them back in school based on their age. If they are 5, they will go to kindergarten. If they're 6, they'll go to first grade. If they're 7, they'll be in second grade, and so on and so forth. But who decided that children needed to be graded based on their age? The second way that we use grades in school is to refer to a level. You will often hear teachers say, oh, your child is on a 3rd grade reading level, or this child is above grade level, or below grade level. Each grade is meant to indicate some particular level of difficulty that, in theory, should increase over time. And we attach these levels of difficulty to grades, which are attached to a child's age. And ironically enough, these levels of difficulty end when school ends. We have elementary grade level, middle school level, high school level, college level, graduate level, doctoral level, but there's really no level beyond that. There is no level outside of school. There's no 30-year-old grade level or 40-year-old grade level or no retiree grade level, for example. So this kind of leveling of difficulty is something that is very unique to compulsory school that does not exist in the real world. There's no set of standards that any person needs to know or have achieved by the time they reach any other grade or any other age in life besides school. And last but not least, we assign grades such as A, B, C, D, or E in order to classify a child's ability. However, as a former public school teacher, I can tell you that the system is incredibly corrupted, arbitrary, and essentially meaningless. If you have read my book, Tales of a Toxic Teacher, you may remember the story from an introduction where I shared about a student who walked out of my class on the first day of school after throwing a desk at me, and then he ultimately passed my class and graduated at the end of the year without ever attending. Someone gave him 60% in my class for all 4 quarters, even though he never attended. Or perhaps you've seen a grading scale that looks like this. This school in Memphis decided to change their grading scale, which meant that an older student who received a D on the old grading scale would actually have had a C on the new one. Why? Was their ability any different? No. Someone just decided to change the scale. Or perhaps you've seen a grading scale that looks like this. This is actually one of the grading scales for a standardized test. Do you notice anything odd here? A 500 out of 800 is considered proficient. That's a 62.5%. You could be considered proficient in something with a D. And to be considered advanced, you would need a 650 out of 800, which is an 81%, which is a B, unless you're using that alternative grading scale in which an 81% is a C. But basic is a 50%. In some states, basic is the goal for students and is even considered passing, even if they don't meet grade level expectations. But again, expectations from whom and for what? I spent my last year as a teacher teaching special education at the same high school that I graduated from. They decided to revise the grading table because students now were performing so terribly. A student could achieve a grade A in the first quarter and a B in the second quarter, And before, they would have had a B because it was a downward trend. You got an A first and then a B, so your ultimate grade for the semester would be a B. But now they changed it. Now, if you got an A the first quarter and a B second quarter, your semester grade would be an A, even though there was a downward trend. Another student could get an A first quarter and a D their second quarter, and their transcript would show a B for their final grade. I want you to take a minute to look at the way that they would do these grades, with the first quarter grade, the second quarter grade, and then ultimately deciding what their semester grade would be. Keep in mind, colleges will never see their quarter grades. They would only see the semester grade. So a student could have a B on their transcript, and the college would never know that they had actually gotten a D the quarter before. There are some counties that are now implementing a 50-point grading scale, which looks very similar to kind of the more traditional 100-point grading scale. But in this case, a student cannot get lower than a 50%. A student could, in theory, get every single question wrong on a test or a quiz and be given 50 points simply for trying. In some counties, they actually will take an average of all of your grades numerically and then give you one final grade at the end of the year instead of semester grades. Some schools are even shifting from a letter grade-based report card to a standards-based report card, where students are given a numeric score from 1 to 4 on the specific standards that they supposedly should know. But again, who determines these standards? Some universities are starting to realize the absolute absurdity of the grading system and are instead opting for what they refer to as an ungrading system. The students complete assignments, they show meaningful progress. Again, not really sure what that means or who decides what that means. And then they give themselves either an A, a B, or a C, completely doing away with D's and E's. And some schools are even giving students the choice between earning a letter grade or simply a pass-fail model. There are many alternative grading policies in schools all across the country. In addition to the policies we just talked about, some schools offer a mandatory 100% for completion of classwork and homework. So work is graded based on completion and not on accuracy or their actual knowledge and mastery of the content. Some schools provide students with unlimited opportunities to reassess or basically redo virtually any assignment. Some schools incorporate a weighted grading system, giving more weight to tests and quizzes and projects or some courses. Some teachers choose to grade on a bell curve. Some schools have a no-zero grading policy, which means that a teacher cannot give a 0 to any student, another very popular way to inflate grades, which means that the lowest grade a student could get is a 50% in that case. Some schools have no late penalties, no deadlines for student work, and there are also schools that choose to issue no grades at all. Now, I say all of this to say that at PAX Academy, you truly are free. We give you the freedom to grade or not grade yourself and your child in whatever way that you believe is best. There are so many different ways that public schools, private schools, charter schools, alternative schools, colleges, and universities assign grades to students. Grades are not an accurate reflection of what any child knows, what they can do, or what that child is capable of. So as unschoolers, you get to decide if and how you want to earn grades. Remember, at PAX Academy, you can earn grades in any one of the 3 ways. First, which is the most kind of traditional or standard way, you can take a class. Unschooling does not mean not having any formal or structured learning. It simply means that the child is the one that is choosing it. And sometimes children do want to take a formal, structured class, and that's totally fine. We have several classes that are offered online through our PAX Academy website, and I'll show you that later on in this video. Also, keep in mind that you do not need to finish everything in the class in order to earn credit for that class. For example, when I was teaching high school math, our county offered a class called 2-Year Algebra 2. This was a math class that was 1 year of algebra that was spread over the course of 2 years. Even though the students only did half of the work that the other students in the school had to do, they earned the same amount of credit as those students who did the entire year of algebra in 1 year. My first year as a teacher, I taught Spanish at a Title I school. I told my supervisor that I was so nervous that I would not be able to teach through all 10 chapters of our textbook during the school year. She just laughed and said, "Angela, no teacher ever finishes the book. Just try to get through half of it." I made it to chapter 4 by the end of the year, and that was more than most of my colleagues. All that to say, if you finish the entire class, awesome. If you finish the entire textbook, awesome. And also, if you finish half of the class, that's okay too, as long as it's okay for you. Another thing is that you're not limited to classes that we offer through PAX Academy. You are welcome to use whatever resources you choose, and you can even create your own class and your own curriculum. The goal is to learn what you want, how you want, when you want, and why you want as a self-motivated, self-managing, self-monitoring individual. The second way to earn grades is by taking a test. In high school, students can earn both high school and college credits by taking either an AP test or a CLEP test. I encourage you to read through the student handbook if you would like to learn more about those different kinds of tests. But basically, you could take a test, and if you pass, then you can get credit for the class. And if you don't pass, then you can study more and try again. Taking a test is a great way to save both time and money. If you are going to put in the effort to earn the credits for high school, then why not take the test and earn credits for both high school and college? Now, I typically recommend taking a test only for students that are older and are choosing this again for themselves. Most children in elementary and middle school are not voluntarily wanting to take a test. But there are some high school students that are interested in earning both high school and college credit, and so taking a test might be a great option for you. And last but not least, you can take your time. 1 credit hour at the college level represents 3 hours of work per week. That means that a year-long class represents about 100 hours of your life. So consider all of the time that you spend practicing your favorite instrument, playing your favorite sport, cooking your favorite meals, visiting your favorite museums and historic sites, volunteering at your favorite charity, watching fascinating documentaries and YouTube videos, and even more. Every single thing that you do in your life can be converted into academic credit. So reflect on the meaningful ways that you invest your time, and we can help you convert that into credits that you can use to graduate high school, as well as earn your portfolio credit for college. Most of the time, when you earn credits through your life experience, you will earn an A or a B because you are actively engaged in pursuing something that you are passionate about and skilled in. You learn what you learn, and you didn't learn what you didn't learn, and that's okay. Determining your grade for your life experience is a great way to practice that self-monitoring that we discussed at the beginning of this meeting. When students get to high school, I recommend that they book a college and career consultation with me, and we talk through how to give yourself grades and how to assess your mastery of the different subject areas based on your real life, real world experience. And I have found that every single time that I give young people, teenagers, the opportunity to assess themselves and assess their own mastery, they are so much harder on themselves than I would be. Originally, when I started doing this, I was very concerned. I thought if we give students the freedom to just give themselves a grade based on whatever they think, they're all just going to give themselves A's, even if they don't know anything. And I was very, very worried about that. But I found that that is not true. In fact, my students are much harder on themselves than I ever would be. And they do. They are very honest in their self-reflection. They will give themselves A's, they will give themselves B's, and they will even give themselves C's. But again, it's creating a space as well where they understand that those letters and those numbers and these grades do not mean anything bad about them as a person. It is just a letter. And it's not good, it's not bad, it just is what it is. And wherever you are is okay. Now, I want to talk with you about how we do grades specifically at PAX Academy. For the elementary school level, I recommend that you submit grades for all 10 of the school subjects or as many of them as you can. Again, you are welcome to review your state's requirements if you like, but because you are registered in PAX Academy, you really do have the freedom to create your child's transcript in whatever way is most meaningful for you and whatever way resonates with you and your beliefs. So, that being said, you can either create a standards based transcript or you could create a credit based transcript. In general, for elementary school, they will either get credit or no credit, or sometimes they will say that they're meeting expectations or achieving expectations. Again, what expectations could be yours or it could be the child's expectations. There's no specific standard of saying what those expectations are that they have to meet. I do ask that you submit your grades by May 31st. And at the end of this presentation, I'll talk to you specifically and I'll show you how you actually will submit those grades or credits. With middle school students, those are students in grades 6 through 8, again, typically around the ages of 11 to 13. I recommend that they get 4 of the core subjects, which are English, math, science, and social studies, that those should be reflected on their transcript in some way, and that they would also get up to 4 electives. So you could pick whatever those electives are that reflect the learning that your children are doing in their real life. Again, just like the elementary ones, you can also do standards based or you could do credit based. And those are final grades. So they get 1 grade for the year, which is submitted at the end of the year. Now, with high school, things are a little bit different. At the high school level, keep in mind your high school transcript is the only transcript that colleges and universities will see. They will not see your elementary or middle school transcripts, just high school. At the high school level, instead of doing 1 grade for the entire year or 1 credit for the entire year, they will actually earn semester grades. So in high school, you will need to submit the first semester grades by December 31st and the second semester grades by May 31st. Now, I know that there are many of you that enjoy working a little bit faster, or some of you that prefer taking your time. And if you need to, that is totally fine. In fact, there are several students already that have finished their entire year worth of credits from their real life, real world experience or from taking classes at an accelerated pace. And so they have, or from testing out of everything. So they have already finished their entire year's worth of credits and earned their full year's worth of credits. And it's December, the beginning of December. So if you are one of those people that you are wanting to work faster and finish your year early, you can totally do that too. Your year ends whenever you submit your final grades for the year. So I just need 2 grades, your first semester and second semester grades, and then that's it. Now let's talk about submitting grades. With PAX Academy, you have 2 different options to be able to submit your grades. The first way is the easiest way, and that is to submit your grades via the online final grades form. You can access the final grades form via the PAX Academy website, and it is also hyperlinked in the student handbook. And again, I'll show you how to do that step by step at the end of this video. The other way that you can submit grades is through booking a consultation. I recommend that all high school students book a college and career consultation in each year, but especially in 9th grade and in 12th grade. During these consultations, this is a great opportunity for students to meet with me one-on-one. We create a custom plan for your education that meets your unique goals and dreams. And most college and career counselors charge $200 per hour, but students in PAX Academy are able to get a 50% discount on that fee. So our graduation consultation is just $100. At PAX Academy, I also recommend using a traditional 10-point grading scale if you want to use grades, simply because this is what most colleges are used to seeing on a typical transcript. So a 90 to 100 would be an A, 80 to 89 would be a B, 70 to 79 would be a C, 60 to 69 would be a D, and a 0 to 59 would be an E. But typically, homeschoolers and unschoolers will never receive a D or an E because we're working on a mastery-based philosophy. Our students master what they do, and they don't whatever they don't, and whatever they're able to master during that year is great. So whether you choose to use a letter or a number, I want to repeat this, Please know that these letters and these numbers mean nothing about who you are, nothing about what you know, nothing about what you will accomplish in your life, how successful you will be, or what your worth is as a human being. Your grades do not define you. In our society, we have become so accustomed to determining our value and our worth based on our grades. I hope that through this presentation, you have been able to see that grades truly are an arbitrary, useless, and meaningless method of assessing a human being. And as unschoolers, we truly do have the freedom to live without grades and to make grades mean whatever we want them to mean for us. And one last thing I want you to remember: the future is yours. It is yours to create. You are free to create a life that you love with the people that you love the most, and you can do it right now. We do not have to measure ourselves from these arbitrary measures of the traditional schooling system. And I want you to know that we at PAX Academy are honored to partner with you in creating a great future starting today. And now I will show you how to practically navigate the PAX Academy website.